Work, pay bills, die. The rat race begins at school. It sounds simple, brutal, harsh, maybe even cynical, like a bitter truth no one wants to admit out loud. But here's the uncomfortable reality. This isn't just some lazy complaint or meme you scroll past on social media. It's the invisible script that governs millions of lives, quietly trapping us in a cycle of meaninglessness we never chose. This phrase didn't come from a lazy cynic or a complainer. It comes from the harshest observers of human nature, philosophers like Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, men who dared to stare into the soul of modern life and saw something terrifying, a life consumed by routine, conformity, and silent despair. They saw how the rat race starts long before the office cubicle or the paycheck. It begins early, inside classrooms and assembly lines of education, where creativity dies and obedience is born. But why? Why do we accept this cycle? Is it weakness, arrogance, blind obedience, or something far more painful, fear of breaking free, of being alone, of facing the unknown? We're not here to sugarcoat this reality. We're not here to romanticize struggle or excuse suffering. We're here to ask the hard questions. Why does life often feel like a slow death? Why does society push us to chase survival instead of meaning? And is there a way out of this prison they built for us? If you've ever felt like you're just going through the motions, living to work, working to pay bills, and waiting to die, then this conversation is for you. Because behind these cold, harsh words is a call to awaken, a call to reclaim your life, to break the chains of the rat race, to live, not just survive. Section 2. Friedrich Nietzsche. The Will to Power and Breaking the Rat Race. Friedrich Nietzsche was not interested in making people feel better. He wanted to make them wake up. He saw modern life not as progress, but as a trap disguised as comfort, a slow spiritual death dressed up in career titles, paychecks, and polite smiles. Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a bomb thrown at the foundations of modern complacency. At the core of his philosophy is a savage truth. Most people are not living, they are obeying. What we call life is often just survival in disguise. Nietzsche called it slave morality, a mindset conditioned to accept weakness, conformity, and submission. It's the morality of the herd, the morality of those too afraid to rise above, so they convince themselves that mediocrity is virtue. The rat race, to Nietzsche, was not just a grind, it was a system that domesticated the human spirit. It starts in childhood. School becomes the training ground for obedience. You're taught what to think, not how to think. You're taught to raise your hand, follow the rules, and memorize answers instead of asking better questions. Creativity is boxed in. Rebellion is pathologized. And slowly a dangerous transformation takes place. The wild, curious soul of a child becomes a compliant adult. An adult who trades time for money, who sits in meetings pretending to care, who wakes up every day with a subtle sense of dread, but buries it under caffeine and routine. This isn't a life. It's a loop. It's the ritual of the unawakened. But Nietzsche didn't accept this fate. Not for himself, and not for you. His vision was brutal, but it was also liberating. He believed in the power of the individual to rise above all inherited values, all lies sold to us by religion, politics, culture, or even family, and become something more. Enter the Übermensch or the Overman. This is Nietzsche's answer to the rat race. The Overman is not a worker drone. He doesn't beg for validation. He doesn't wait for permission to live. He creates his own values. He doesn't just escape the system, he transcends it. This isn't some fantasy or superhero ideal. It's a call to arms, to live intentionally, to face the chaos of life with courage, and to shape yourself like an artist chiseling stone. The Übermensch is a man who has looked into the abyss and decided to build meaning anyway. One of Nietzsche's most piercing truths is this: he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. It's not just motivational, It's a spiritual survival tactic. Without a why, life is unbearable. You will suffer. You will be broken by routine. You will rot in a system that doesn't care about your dreams. But if you find your why, your mission, your inner fire, you become unstoppable. This is the will to power, not domination over others, but mastery over self. It's the force that says, I will not live on my knees. It's the power that lets a man walk away from comfort, from fake status, from societal scripts, and build something real, even if he has to suffer for it. Nietzsche wasn't telling you to rebel for the sake of it. He wasn't anti-work or anti-discipline. He was anti-delusion, anti-slavery, anti-anything that robbed a man of his birthright to live as a creator, not just a consumer. So what does this mean for you? If you feel trapped, if your days are blurring into one long, meaningless grind, Nietzsche isn't whispering. He's yelling, wake up, fight back, stop obeying lies, and take your life into your own hands. The rat race owns the man who forgets he has a choice. But the man who chooses his own values, his own goals, his own code, that man can never be enslaved. He may not be understood, he may be mocked, he may walk alone, but he will walk free. And that, Nietzsche reminds us, is the only life worth living. Section 3, Fyodor Dostoevsky, The Existential Pain of the Rat Race. Fyodor Dostoevsky wasn't just a writer, he was a prophet of the soul, a man who didn't flinch in the face of darkness, but walked straight into it, bringing back truths that most people spend their lives trying to avoid. He didn't write for entertainment. He wrote to save people from spiritual death. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky introduces us to a strange, bitter man, isolated, hyper-intelligent, and suffocating in his own thoughts. This underground man is not simply at war with society, he's at war with himself. He mocks modernity, reason, and progress. But underneath the sarcasm is agony. The agony of knowing too much, but doing too little. The pain of seeing the world clearly, but lacking the will to change it. This is the hidden pain of the rat race. Not just the surface-level exhaustion of working long hours or chasing paychecks. Not just the stress of bills or the monotony of a 9-to-5. That's just the outer shell. Dostoevsky's genius was to show us the deeper torment, the internal paralysis that takes hold when a man's life becomes disconnected from his soul. Many modern men are living exactly this kind of despair. They wake up, go to jobs they secretly resent, answer emails they don't care about, sit in meetings that drain their spirit, and come home to distractions, TV, social media, anything to avoid the silence. But in the stillness, the truth creeps in. This can't be it. This wheel they're stuck on, it never ends. It never fulfills. Dostoevsky knew this feeling well. He had been to hell through prison, poverty, illness, and near execution. And through it all, he came to a brutal insight. The worst suffering is not physical. The worst suffering is the sense that your life has no meaning, that you've lost your ability to feel, to believe, to love, to hope. In the Brothers Karamazov, Crime and Punishment and Demons, he drags us into the murky depths of the human spirit. He makes us sit with guilt, madness, obsession, and doubt. Why? Because he understood that transformation begins in the truth. Not the Instagram version of your life, not the polite mask you wear in public, but the raw, aching, unfiltered truth of your own condition. He said, man is a mystery, it needs to be unraveled. But unraveling it hurts. It means facing the reality that maybe you've been asleep, that maybe you've betrayed yourself by conforming, by staying safe, by running on autopilot. But here's what makes Dostoevsky's message so powerful. He didn't believe that pain was punishment. He believed pain was revelation, a kind of spiritual fire that burns away illusions and forces rebirth. For him, suffering was sacred, not because it's pleasant, but because it reveals what truly matters. He wrote, "The darker the night, the brighter the stars. The deeper the grief, the closer is God." In other words, your despair is not the end. It's the signal that your soul is still alive, that it's fighting to be heard beneath the noise of the world. Dostoevsky forces us to confront something terrifying. What happens when all the distractions fall away? When you realize your career won't save you, that no paycheck, no promotion, no possession can fill the emptiness inside? That is the spiritual crisis of the rat race. It's not about logistics. It's about the soul's silent scream for something more. And until you listen to that scream, until you respond, not with numbness but with courage, you will stay trapped, not by society, but by yourself. And that's Dostoevsky's final, brutal truth. The worst prison is not made of walls or wages. It's made of resignation. But if you're willing to face the pain, not run from it, not drown it out, but face it, then that pain becomes your path, your guide, your wake-up call. Because in the end, the rat race isn't something you escape by quitting your job or moving to the mountains. You escape it by reclaiming your will, your values, your soul. And you begin that process, as Dostoevsky teaches us, by daring to ask the hardest question of all. What if the life I've built is not the life I truly want? Section 4. The Modern Man's Response. From Heartbreak to Power. So what does the modern man do with this knowledge? After hearing the brutal wisdom of Friedrich Nietzsche and feeling the gut-wrenching truths exposed by Fyodor Dostoevsky, what now? When you wake up and see the world for what it is, a mechanical system designed to condition, consume, and discard you, how do you respond? The first reaction for most men is heartbreak, and not just romantic heartbreak. We're talking about existential heartbreak, the moment you realize you've been living someone else's script, that all your sacrifices, your efforts, your achievements, they weren't necessarily for you. They were for a system, for an economy, for survival, for approval. This heartbreak is a form of grief, the grief of wasted potential, the grief of knowing that somewhere along the way your dreams got replaced by deadlines, that the boy who once imagined doing something great with his life has become a man stuck in routines, chasing money, escaping boredom, and trying to numb a deep emptiness with distractions. But as Nietzsche would say, to live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. This pain, as soul-crushing as it feels, is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the start of transformation, of rebirth. Nietzsche doesn't tell you to avoid suffering. He tells you to walk through it and use it. He gives you the idea of the will to power, a drive, a force, a spiritual momentum that turns heartbreak into strength, despair into clarity, and routine into rebellion. But not a rebellion based on noise and chaos, a rebellion of creation. To become the Übermensch, the higher man, who doesn't conform to the herd or chase validation, but creates his own values and lives deliberately. And then there's Dostoevsky, whose characters didn't fight systems with protests or politics, but with spiritual awakening. His novel Notes from Underground paints a man who is trapped not by the world, but by his own inner torment. It's a warning that the greatest prison isn't out there in the system. It's inside you, your fear, your passivity, your comfort. Dostoevsky shows us that the rat race doesn't just kill the body with exhaustion. It kills the soul with apathy. He forces you to confront the sickening feeling that even when you follow all the rules, get the degree, the job, the house, the family, you still feel empty. And that's the real tragedy, not failing, but succeeding at something meaningless. But he doesn't leave you hopeless. Dostoevsky believed in redemption through suffering, through faith, through facing the darkest parts of yourself and choosing to rise anyway. Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart, he wrote. That pain becomes your teacher. That emptiness becomes your fuel. The modern man's response, then, must begin with honesty, radical honesty. Stop pretending. Stop settling. Stop playing dead while you're still alive. You must reclaim your inner authority, your ability to choose your path, even if it makes no sense to anyone else. You must say no to the job that steals your soul, no to the life of quiet desperation, no to being just another cog in the machine. And that takes courage, not the kind they show in movies, but the quiet, painful, everyday courage to get up and build something of your own. Whether it's a side hustle, a craft, a body transformation, or a spiritual path, you must begin creating instead of consuming. You must become a builder of your life, not a passive tenant in someone else's plan. This is what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are, and what Dostoevsky meant by facing the abyss and walking forward anyway. The modern man's response is this: wake up, break the trance, and turn your heartbreak into power. Because the world doesn't need more men who follow the script. It needs more men who burn it and write something real in its place. Section 5. Conclusion. The real lesson from Nietzsche and Dostoevsky. Friedrich Nietzsche and Fyodor Dostoevsky were not just philosophers confined to academic thought. They were radical truth-tellers who understood the hidden suffering of modern life long before the rest of the world caught up. These were men who saw, with brutal clarity, how the systems we build, schools, jobs, institutions, often do not serve the individual, but rather suppress him. They diagnosed the disease we now call the rat race, but more importantly, they offered us the tools to escape it. Nietzsche, in his bold and relentless pursuit of truth, warned that blind conformity is the slow death of the soul. He believed that modern society conditions us to obey, to fit in, and to avoid discomfort at all costs. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche writes of the last man, a figure who is comfortable, safe, and utterly lifeless. He warned that we were becoming that man, afraid to suffer, afraid to risk, afraid to live. For Nietzsche, the solution was not to follow the herd, but to rise above it. He challenged us to become the Übermensch, the overman, someone who rejects imposed values and instead creates his own path. He did not sugarcoat the price of this transformation. It requires pain. It demands sacrifice. But it is the only way to truly live. On the other hand, Fyodor Dostoevsky approached the human condition through deep psychological insight. His characters, such as those in Notes from Underground, show us the inner torment of the man trapped between obedience and despair. Dostoevsky understood that modern man is not merely overworked, he is spiritually empty. In his world, suffering is not a curse to be avoided, but a reality to be confronted, because only through facing our own pain can we uncover our purpose. He didn't offer neat answers or easy escapes, but he believed that even in the darkest moments, meaning could be found. Together, Friedrich Nietzsche and Fyodor Dostoevsky force us to see that the rat race isn't just about jobs and bills. It is a state of spiritual paralysis where we trade freedom for security, passion for routine, and meaning for survival. Nietzsche pushes us to rebel against the systems that dull our instincts. Dostoevsky pushes us inward, asking us to face the suffering we try so hard to avoid. One calls us to action, the other calls us to reflection, but both point to the same truth. Life, in its rawest form, is a struggle, but within that struggle is our chance to truly live. As Nietzsche famously said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. And Dostoevsky, with equal depth, wrote, "Pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart." These are not quotes meant to impress. They are lifelines for anyone who feels the emptiness of routine and dares to search for more. The rat race begins early, sometimes as early as the classroom, but it does not have to define your story. You do not have to die with your song still in you. You can question, you can rebel, you can create. The cycle can be broken, but only if you have the courage to wake up and see the prison for what it really is. You were not born to simply work, pay bills, and die. You were born to suffer, yes, but also to transform. You were born to think, to choose, and to live. And that is the real lesson from Nietzsche and Dostoevsky.